So now let's introduce our guest of honor, Joe Minicozzi, who is founder and principal of Urban3, a firm that specializes in land use and public safety. Hi, Joe. Say hi. Wave to us.
Hello.
There he is. Urban3 is based in Asheville, North Carolina, and that's where Joe is today. And they work with cities across the U.S. and Canada to help assess the most and least fiscally productive areas within a city to guide future planning and development. And Joe has extensive experience in working with government, real estate development, and finance. He owns a master's degree in architecture and urban design from Harvard, and he has been a featured speaker in over 160 cities in the U.S. and across the world. He's joining us via Google Meet today to share the results of the Economic Impact Study and to help us gain perspectives on the significance of the findings for future planning. So Joe is going to share his screen in a minute, but please give Joe a warm welcome to Kansas City in his virtual way. Joe, you're up on the big screen.
Okay, and just before I start sharing screen, just to let you know, I'm going to go through a little bit of my past history. Just so that you know, I was part of our downtown association here in Asheville, and I did a lot of this work that you're going to see here for our community. So I know your pain of trying to communicate this stuff to your citizens. And I also have my colleague, Leah Hanriger, who's been part of the analysis for this work. So the two of us will be here for the Q&A. And I'm just going to disappear and share the screen now. So I'll see you on the other side. Oh, also, as I start, I realize there's a lot of slides here. I'm going to go really fast through them. It's sort of my style to present visually. You're going to have this whole thing as a PDF copy when I'm done. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is a shot of downtown Asheville from the late 80s. This is a shot from the early 90s. We effectively just walked away from our downtown and it wasn't who we are anymore. We're rural mountain people. We just left this town to decay. This happened in a lot of communities, particularly urban communities. When they start to suburbanize, they just evacuate the downtown. I worked for Julian Price's company. It's called Public Interest Projects. It's a for-profit real estate developer, and our job was fixing up buildings and putting apartments downtown, but also businesses like restaurants and nightclubs and things like that. And we found ourselves constantly communicating with the city to understand what our development was doing for the whole city as a whole, because there's very little difference between who my city of Asheville is and what we're doing as a real estate development company. It's essentially the same thing, that the public is essentially a public real estate developer. So for you all, your improvement district is effectively functioning as that sort of co-op of your community or your area of Westport that sits within the corporation of Kansas City, which sits within the corporation of the state of Missouri, but that sits within the corporation of the state of the United States. It's our form of government is to behave this way. And if any legal nerds in the room, on the bottom of the slide here, I have the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. It's basically who we are. So my city at $14 billion of taxable value is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. You'd expect Ted Turner to look at data to understand what's going on financially with their companies and see the data information of what makes it work. So if Ted Turner is doing that and not making decisions based off what's happening on Facebook, shouldn't my city be doing the same thing? So my state made it illegal for my city to annex land. So those acres are all that we have. We can't annex, or take a look at the boundaries of your CID. That's pretty much who you are. So those acres are really finite. So you should understand how they work as a crop. And when you talk to farmers, they all talk in economic terms about crop production. What's the labor per acre, the water per acre, et cetera. So this is a building that we rehabbed. Ground floor, retail, second floor office, upper story residential. We wouldn't have rehabbed this building if it weren't for the city doing the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and the street tree. That's super awesome. We took the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million. People said that we were subsidized, and it's like, well, okay, fine, we didn't pay for that sidewalk, but we took the taxes and grew them by 3,500% on this property. This is the money that comes out of this building to our community. So go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. And again, people would say to me, well, Joe, that's cute and everything. That's $11 million, but this Walmart is 20 million. It's like, okay, fair enough. It took 34 acres of my city to make that Walmart versus our 0.2 acres. So when people talk economically about buildings, they typically talk about it in full value. They don't understand or they don't speak about it in the productivity standpoint. So from a productivity standpoint, per acre, we're producing 100 times more property taxes. So yeah, you've got 34 acres of that Walmart, but to be fair, we should be doing 34 acres of my downtown as a comparable, make things apples to apples. So per acre, we're producing 100 times more property taxes, double the sales taxes, obviously a lot more residents and more jobs. I'm just blasting through this information to set the tone for how we look at analytic data or how we analyze data for cities. We're always looking at things apples to apples. And don't be afraid of the math that we're doing. This isn't complex stuff. This is very simple, basic productivity. So let me use a different device. If we were to talk about cars, and imagine if I were to say my truck gets 650 miles per gallon or per tank, you'd laugh at me and you'd say, Joe, all tanks are different sizes. We don't judge by the tank, we judge by the gallon. And all of a sudden the numbers changed. There's no magic here. And we say this because we know that all tanks are different sizes and we should all be driving BMW Asettas because they're getting the most efficiency out of a gallon of gas. So you understand that. We understand this with gasoline. Just take it toward real estate. So we've done a lot of analysis all over the country. And this is like a mashup of about 60 cities. For every dollar of taxes that the county gets per acre out of single family, they're getting 5 times that out of the city that sits inside that county to the county. Remember, the city taxpayers are county taxpayers. Then there's the Walmart, there's the mall. And as soon as you get to a 2-story building that mixes uses, you see this big step up to about $48 a square foot, another step up at 95, and then a huge jump when you get to a 6-story building. All of this is under the high-rise threshold. So we're not talking about skyscrapers here. You see the potency that happens on any main street, and this could be Broadway in Westport, or it could be downtown Main Street in Driggs, Idaho, or Durham, North Carolina. As you stack stories, you're stacking your dollar bills. It's that simple. Early on, I used to get comments from people when I would do this. They're like, Joe, what's your problem? You hate Walmart, because I've used Walmart twice in this. I just need you to realize this isn't about Walmart. And I want to give you a really fun story. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers conference, which is like the squarest conference I've ever done, a bunch of property assessors. And this guy got up and did this amazing presentation on how cheap his buildings are. Think about how smart that is. He's got 3,000 assessors in one meeting, and he's getting all of his property taxes lowered with one presentation. That's super smart. So I asked him, I went to the microphone and I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he shot back 15, 20 years. We designed that building to depreciate as fast as possible. We don't care, it's throwaway. So you need to realize this, that when they're designing something in your community, they're maximizing their dollar in your community. You get left with a $15 investment. Is that what you want? Is you want a 15-year investment in your community is the, I don't know, life cycle of a cat. I'm joking. I'm a dog person. I'm doing this to make a point that when you look around your world architecturally, there are policies that are driving decisions on the form that gets built. So we would say that people don't see this because we talk about mathematics or policy in kind of opaque ways that's difficult to understand. So how do I help you see it? So let me give you another metaphor. If I were to show you your brain with your brainstem activity in blue and your creative thought process in green, can I do an economic MRI of your place? So back to my community real quick. This is my county. I did this for our State of the Downtown address back in the day because one of our state representatives called my city a cesspool of sin. And I'm not making this up. And he actually doubled down and said, it's not the city, it's the downtown part that's the cesspool. So we made this map of the county. This is a full taxable value. So you've got non-taxable in gray. This is Mount Mitchell Federal Park. It's a park, it doesn't pay taxes. Green is low value. You see low value up here. And purple is high value. This is the Biltmore estate. That one parcel right there is worth $100 million. Super valuable, really cool. But it's not fair to look at it that way because it's a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. 180,000 square foot house. I said that right. It is the biggest house in America. So it's like the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, here's value per acre. And then you see this heat shift. And let's not stop there. Here it is in 3D. So when I presented this at our downtown event, I asked people in the county who were in the room, I said, can you tell me where downtown Asheville might possibly be? And somebody said the Big Purple Mountain. And I was like, that's it. So if we're all paying the same county tax rate, the same county millage rate, where's the county getting all of its money? It's that downtown part. So in defense of folks that are out in Fairview, they don't know about our downtown. They don't know what we produce, but they think that their tax bills are a lot. They have no idea what our tax bills are. So just share that with them. Show folks what's going on. So this is the basics of how we present information, and let's talk about what we did for you all. The first thing that we have to do when we come to any community, we have to figure out your tax system. Our tax system in North Carolina is pretty simple. It's a straight tax system. Yours has a couple extra steps. I'll show you what a straight tax system is. Basically, we have a couple of exemptions if you're a disabled veteran in North Carolina. That's it. But basically, your market value equals a tax value. And we basically are in control of the millage rate locally, and that's how you create a tax bill. In Missouri, what you all have is you take a portion of your market value. So you set one deduction down, which is your assessment percentage, to get to an assessed value. Once you have the assessed value, then you're lifting off your exemptions, and then you're multiplying that times your levy rate to get your tax bill. So you have that extra step of reducing the overall number that you look at. So from a commercial standpoint, let's take $1 million of commercial and $1 million of residential. You have a different way of looking at your assessment percentage. So you're doing 32% of the commercial and 19% of the residential to step it down to 320 and 190,000 respectively. And then you multiply your base city rate. It's the same tax rate for both, but you notice tax bills are totally different. So another way of looking at it is you all charge commercial 1.7 times more than you charge residential, which this doesn't happen in North Carolina. So this is just something that's different about your state, and we calculated that into the model. Additionally, your sales taxes are a little bit more detailed than what we have. So we'll talk about that. Basically, if I were to be a shopper inside Kansas City, I'm going to be paying the state 4%, a little bit more than that. The same is true in Westport. And their county is going to get about, let's say, 1.4 times out of that as a percentage. The city is going to take about double what the county takes. And then if you're in Westport, you pay an additional 2%, which is the cherry on top. So when somebody drops $1 of sales taxes in Westport, Westport doesn't receive all of that dollar. There are other folks that take from that sales tax dollar as well. So that's just breaking it down, that basically for every $100 spent in Westport, you'll get $2 of sales revenue to the district. So you're taking a little piece off the top. So if a Kansas City shopper or Westport shopper both spend $100, there's eight cents of that, or about 9 cents, goes to the state, the county, and the city. And then 2% would be going to the Westport shopping district. So the total sales tax would be a little bit more in Westport versus outside in Kansas City. But that $2 gets recirculated into the county to pay for goods and services that you need in your district. So this is just a breakdown of that. The budget, you've got there's the old Westport boundary, and then within the Westport boundary, think of them as a nesting doll. You have your CID district, which is a sub-district inside your district. We're going to look at both of those and how they function. But you basically think of them as a place within a place in your community. This is your city as a map as a whole, and this is about the size of the Westport CID inside the area to scale. So to blow it up a little bit, that's what y'all look like. That's your boundary of your CID. So now to compare them financially, Westport produces about $2.9 million in revenues. You spend that $2.9 million. The city gets a tremendous amount of money out of its to pay for its budget. It's actually more than 1.2 billion. We eliminated things like the water system and the airport and stuff like that. This is just general services, and it spends a little bit more than that in expenses. But on a per acre basis, if we were to compare them, this is how you would look. So you punch way over your weight. Is a scale standpoint for your dollar that's generated per acre, you're producing about 24,000 per acre versus citywide's only producing about 7,000 per acre. So that's something to be proud of. It's very potent. We see this a lot with little downtown districts or larger downtown districts. It doesn't matter. It's the potency of density that you all have in your community, which is a lesson to learn. This is the city's budget overview with, there's a lot of little categories like licensing permits. This is basically a pie chart. And this is another way of showing this information. It's called an area chart. It's just a pie chart done as a box, but it lets you see the relative scale of grants versus sales and use tax. So you can see that the majority of your money is the earnings tax, sales tax, and property tax. And as you all know, sales tax produces more than property tax in Kansas City. So that's kind of the way that the money comes in. This is where the money goes. Police and fire are the two biggest consumers of municipal revenues. But we're going to put on a map. We can put them on a map because they're geospatial. We know where the property taxes are coming from. We know where the earning taxes generally are coming from, as well as the sales and use taxes. Grants, those are kind of everywhere. So we're just going to focus on the physical stuff. This is your Kansas City budget, and then jumping down into your CID. You can see that property taxes are the biggest contributor to your CID, followed closely by number 2 is your sales taxes. These are your grants down here. And that the lion's share of your revenue is spent on security and professional services in your district. But again, we're going to be putting this stuff on a map. So this is one way of looking at the economic data. Some people like these charts. This is another chart to show that flow. Same data, just a different presentation. This is called a Sankey diagram. We call them butterfly charts. But basically it shows where the money's coming from in the buckets that they produce, where they go to, and then where they get spent. Again, this is really difficult to show in a PowerPoint presentation. This is a better, these data points are better to see as a PDF, but we produced these for you so you can see them. So to compare let's put Westport on the left, side by side with the city, so you can see the scale of your property taxes and your CID versus what the city concerns itself with. So you can see that the city is going to be more interested in these two. You all don't get any earnings tax in your CID. That's just not part of your financial system. And this is what you're contributing if you're to take your sales and use taxes of what you contribute and also your property taxes. Those may look like small little bits to the city, but realize you're contributing 2% of the city's sales taxes. You're only on 0.1% of the city's area. So you're punching way above your weight, or you're producing 1% of property tax, and you're also just 0.1% of. So that's a factor of 10 that you're producing in your property tax as a gain. So that's pretty good. And your expenditures, looking at your expenditures side by side with the city. On the left is y'all, and on the right is the city. Just we produced these so you could see them. Okay. Your map. This is your city. We kind of laid it on its side. North is upward. This is total value, total taxable value. So you see the large parcels in North Kansas City are super potent. But again, that's not per acre. Here's per acre. And then you see the heat shift into a spine on the back right here. And this is it. And you're kind of sitting in there as the old Westport boundary. And here it is in 3D. This is we had data from 2018. So just to show you the difference from where you were, and these are just highlighting Westport Country Club and downtown as the big spikes in the spine. And then here's what you grew to. So let's go back and forth on this and see them side by side. Incidentally, it looks like there was a revaluation that happened citywide, because you see, particularly on the south side down here, you see how it goes from greens to maybe some yellows here. And you see it also pop up over here versus over here, but it jumps up higher in the ridge from downtown through Country Club Plaza. There's a clear core area of value that runs along the back spine of Kansas City, Missouri. The north side is what it is. It's really not producing all that much given the area that it is. And we'll get through some of the factors of that in a second. But this is just showing you the context of the city. Going into Old Westport by itself, here it is just highlighting Old Westport in 2018. One of the factors that we like to give you is what's your physical footprint to your financial footprint. So you take up 0.1% of the city's land area. You're producing 0.5% of the city's property taxes as a productivity ratio. The ratio of that sliver to this sliver, they don't look like big numbers, but it's a 1-to-10 ratio of productivity. A good downtown is like 1-to-6. So you're outperforming a regular downtown for a city. Now you're the original downtown of the area, but as you combined with the city of Kansas and became Kansas City, you now have multiple downtowns in your city, and you've grown some over time. Since 18 in 2023, you've actually jumped to 10.5. So you have actually experienced some growth, and you know this just by being around the community for the last 5 years. You've seen rehabs and improvements, but basically your district has grown by a factor of 2 in the span of 5 years. So you've gone from a $37 million district to a $75 million district. That's really good. Think of it this way. If you put your money into the stock market and it doubled in 5 years, wouldn't that be a good thing? So this is what's happening in your community. Compare that to the city. The city's only grown by a factor of 1.5. So you've actually accelerated faster in Westport than both the district that you sit in, which is called District 4, but also the city. So this is just showing those growths. This is something to be proud of. You're doing something right here, and that's good for your community. Another factor, we like to make a lot of maps. This is another one. What's taxable and non-taxable? Your city is about 30% non-taxable, and those are things like parks and estuaries, the airport, city hall. There's no magic number here. We just went ahead and ran that map so you'd have it. Also for your district, you're about 25% non-taxable, so the fire station and things like that. So this whole section here is just a bunch of maps and models just to show you spatially how it works. I like to make this joke. It's all spatial analysis. This only works for people over the age of 35. I get it, but I like to make the joke. Anyway, a couple of things to get into when we do spatial analysis. We always ask different questions of the computer, and there's one of my favorite ones. I'm going to show you Cheyenne, Wyoming for a second, then I'll come to you. We can go to the computer and just turn off all of the buildings and just ask, what is the land value per acre? If you look under the label up here on the upper left, you see how this neighborhood is all light blue right there? That's $15,000 an acre. That's how you'd expect the world to look. But if you look over here on the right side of the map, you can see how wildly different this neighborhood is here. It shouldn't be doing that. So this is telling me there's either human error, there's something baked into the mathematical model for the assessments. I don't know, but it shouldn't be that different. But what's interesting, when I presented this in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and you see this is 15,000, and when you cross the street over here on Dell Avenue, same zoning district, you see how it doubles in value from light blue to orange across the street on the south side of the street. And when I presented this, the assessor said to me, I said, why is it the land doubles in value in the same zoning category? And she said, well, she's like, you don't understand. The more land you have, the lower the value. And because there's just less people that can afford large tracts of land. So I immediately said, well, does it work that way with other limited commodities? If I buy a bigger diamond, are they cheaper because less people can afford a bigger diamond? And she goes, well, no, but that's not our standard. So the reason why I was at the assessors conference, I'm not making this up, their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. And I asked, how is that fair that somebody with more land and more infrastructure gets a discount? And to their credit, they're like, that's not fair. We probably need to change it. It's not like Moses delivered these tax codes. This is standards and practices that are out there that you just need to be aware of and realize that it manipulates the market. If you give me a discount for larger tracts of land, I'm going to take that as a developer. So this is your land value map for your city. Here it is in 3D. And it works kind of the way that you'd expect it to work. You can see the downtown cores with their value being potent. But really, when you zoom into it, should you have these little pixie sticks popping up where one person's dirt is so much more valuable than their neighbors around it? Or zooming into your district, you can see how one parcel sticks up quite high. So there's no perfect here. It's the 41 Penn, the land under it is valued more. This could be because it has different zoning or different rights than anybody else has. That's basically tied to the property. I don't know, but it's worth the conversation. We just made these maps because one is it helps with the literacy of understanding what's going on, but it also helps have a conversation in your community to talk with your assessor about why some of these things happen. So I'll give you an example. These are 3 parcels side by side in your district, and this is just 3 different houses that are the same acres, side by side. Here they are, and this is the land value under each of these. You shouldn't experience the dirt value being that different from parcel to parcel to parcel. Now, this person in the middle may have, I don't know, argued for an appeal in their property, who knows? But just have a conversation so you're aware that there's many factors that drive value in your properties, and it's worth having the conversation. So, okay, those are all just the maps and stuff. Now let's walk through some of the buildings. This is your Walmart on Church Road. It's averaging about $200,000 of value per acre. So these are the different ingredients. We're going to go through the ingredients that make up a city. You got your commercial, like a Walmart. We're going to get into residential now. So we've got single family stuff that's called missing middle, or like a 6-plex apartment building, a townhouse, stuff like that. And then you get your bigger stuff that are more in your urbanized areas. But this is your single family. On the bottom left of the slide, you can see we have the Walmart down there is like an indicator. So your single family in Old Westport is averaging double a Walmart in value, if you want to look at it that way. When you get into your missing middle stuff, which is your higher density but residentially scaled buildings, you're seeing it go anywhere from 800,000 to 2 million an acre. So this is if single family is 400,000, this is about what is that, about 5 times that for this stuff. But on average, your missing middle is coming in at around double single family. Then you get into your multifamily stuff, which are your bigger buildings. They could still be low rise, but this is anywhere from 200,000 an acre to 1.2 and 1.8 million an acre. But as a portfolio, they're pulling $900,000 an acre. So how they stack up is this, and it's real. The simple factor here is you put more building on land, it's going to be more productive. So that's just the simple math of that. Now, comparing you against the city, your single family is 4 times more potent than citywide. Your missing middle is about 4 times, and your multifamily is about 4 times the potency. So in every category, you're outshining the city in your productivity for those land use types. So going from residential to commercial, this is your Sunfresh market at it's a little bit about the same as a Walmart in potency. And really what it is because of the parking lot. When you have these large parking lots, it drives down the value of the property. This is also known as a subsidy. If you tax me less for something, I can I can just provide you cheaper goods because I have a bigger field of parking. It also makes for a very bad walkable environment, or it's hard to leverage the density. When you densify a property, you can see that value go up. So here we are at 500,000 and 900,000 respectively. As you get into some of your older buildings, you've got Morning Glory Antiques at 750,000. The Got Hair or Goot Hair at 1.9 million. I don't know how you pronounce that. And then let's think about some of your old buildings that aren't on this 20-year life cycle. This building here is built in 1850, and it's still living its life as a bar now. In 2024 at 1.2 million. So Kelly's has been able to hold that value. And it always hasn't been wonderful, but it hasn't disappeared after a 20-year window. So realize that as you make place, think about the architecture that you want to have in your downtown, but also realizing that it's giving you a tremendous amount of value for generations. And you have newer examples of that, but it's, again, these are in the same district, pulling 2.7 to 3 million. Your newer buildings, 2.3 to 3.8 in the hotels that have been introduced. But the lesson in the mixed use buildings, they're just a lot more potent at 2.2 to 5.5, or about 4.1 million per acre. So just to recap, taking all of these examples and making one slide, I call it the Brady Bunch slide, but it's basically residential across the top, low density, medium density, high density, commercial, low density, medium density, high density, mixed use, low, medium, and high. And these pictures are all sort of indicators of the average for those districts. But here they are as a bar chart to show you that basically as you mix the uses up, as you get denser, you get more value. As you get less dense, you get less value. It's that simple. Okay, so back to putting them in the model, just so you can see them where they're located and how they perform. That 41 Penn building is outperforming by leaps and bounds at 5.5 million. Or think of it this way: it's pretty much 5 times the potency of City Place at Westport, and you can see that in the model. These models are essentially a bar chart put on a map, and it's another way of looking at it. Okay, so that's your property tax stuff. The earnings tax, this is how the city breaks down. Here's the earnings tax. The city collects 1% of earnings on all wages, and it pays for city services like police, fire, street repair. We are not able to actually get everybody, like I know what Jim makes as a salary. We can't get that, but we can get enough data that we can put it on a map so you can see where it's being collected. So Westport is doing all right. You can see it popping up right here. There's districts south of you that are more productive from a density of those jobs. But looking at Westport versus citywide, the taxes per acre that you're producing for earnings tax is about $4,000 per acre. Citywide, Kansas City gets about let's call it a third of that. So that's your productivity of what you're producing, is this effectively a 1-to-3 ratio of productivity of your physical footprint to your financial footprint and earnings tax. I'm going to roll all of this up at the end, but we're just going to go layer by layer. And now we're going into sales tax. Your CID is consuming about 77% of your budget. What that produces to the city is a footprint, is about 2% of the city's contribution. But remember, you're 0.1% of the city's area. So you're very potent. So to stack it up, this is what you look like. You can see how you pop up, and you actually outshine the downtown in your sales potency in your district versus downtown. Country Club Plaza is coming in a little bit higher than you. But if you look on the south side to the areas that are predominantly just large retail boxes, you can see how even though they have big productions as an individual taxpayer, the amount of scale of land that they blow through dilutes that value. So don't get distracted by the overall production. Look at their productivity, if you will. So you're producing about 97,000 or 93,000 per acre in sales taxes versus citywide at 2,000. That's a 1-to-50 ratio. I've said this a couple of times, but you're effectively the mouse that roars. You're a tiny space that is incredibly productive. So that should be celebrated. We charted that over time. Westport is in dark blue, and in yellow is the city. So it always has, and for those folks that are in the room that are retailers, you've experienced this. You've seen the trends and the changes in retail. And it's the factor of a lot of people shop on the internet now. But if you look back to 2005, and we baselined you these numbers starting there and working forward, there's been a decline in both the city and Westport if you look since 2005 for both parcels. But there was a big dip with COVID, and again when inflation spiked, you see the opposite happen. Retail sales tend to drop. But if you measure the gap between your district, and the city, and say, how are we outperforming the city? Well, you're outperforming by a factor of 11%, basically, if you measure that area. So that's something that should be celebrated. Also, I couldn't resist. There could be a lot of conspiracy theories going on why you see these numbers moving around. So we thought we'd bench test it with other key indices of Kansas City. So we measured you against 2005 is when you had Dick Vermeil. You didn't get Andy until about 2013. So there was an inflation that happened, or gains, when Andy Reid showed up for Westport. So that's good. So maybe Patrick Mahomes did something too. And when he dropped in, you see the opposite happen. So it drops with Patrick. Also, Spags showed up then too. And then you won a Super Bowl and you see this drop. And then you got another Super Bowl and another one and a drop again. I couldn't resist that. Like, why did that dip happen? And we all know that's because that's when Tavis happened. So good for you. I'm joking. Anyway, I just couldn't resist. There's no theory that we could find with football, but we did find this measurement. Okay. So onto your other revenues, what we can put on a map, stacking it up like a cake, earnings tax, sales tax, and property tax. This is how it looks. Here's your earnings tax as a base. Again, you're producing 6,000 per acre, or a ratio of 3.6 to 1 to the city. And then here's your sales tax sitting on top of the earnings tax. And you get much more sales tax at about 56,000 an acre, and your ratio to the city of a 30 to 1. And then stack on top of that the property tax. The property taxes, you're at about 12,000, which is about double the earnings tax. So it's sizable, but it's not as big as the sales tax. And your ratio of property tax is 11 to 1. But overall, Westport as a district produces about 9.6 million annually to the city. And your ratio is 16 to 1 for the old Westport district to the city. So you should be proud of that as a district. Now that's old Westport. When you get into your, or another way to think of it, 16 times greater than the area that you take up is what you're punching above your weight. Now, when you drill into just the CID, that number increases from 16 to 1 to 24 to 1. So again, this is where the productivity core is, and you all know that, but the numbers validate that, and it's outperforming citywide. So as you move forward and have conversations with your community, I like to say that in God we trust, but for everyone else, bring the data. These data points will help you make that conversation to talk about this golden goose that you have in the Westport CID. So that's the spendings, or the money side. Let's talk about the infrastructure real quick. This is what Public Works has a budget of 10%, but what makes it onto the physical road is that area that's shaded in. There's only a portion of the budget that goes to the actual physical product, also capital improvements and your debt service. So those three things account for what gets funded into maintenance. And we measure that in the budget, about 10% of your overall city budget. So taking that into your CID and what was spent in the CID area for funding for infrastructure, it's been about 35% of your budget. And you all know that by where you see where it gets spent. There's a couple of things to look at overall, just looking at what the picture of what the city's got to deal with. These are all the projects that are in the works, and you see them all. It's not just in Westport, it's all over the city, spread across the area. But when the city did a call for projects, there was about $700 million worth of projects that were asked for, but they ended up only having the money to fund 30 million. Which the way that they did it is about 5 million per district, or think of this payout. They just divided it up by the neighborhoods and put 5 million in each neighborhood. That seems fair on the surface, but there does beget the question, is that reasonable to give everybody the same, or should that investment be matched toward the production of those areas? And that's a conversation y'all should have. But when you look at what gets spent in each district, Westport's receiving about 37% into the roads in District 4. Sorry, that's not just Westport, that's your whole district, which is this whole red area, which includes downtown, across the river, and to the east. But y'all are just this little area down here. And when you look at the annual road spending, is about 1.6 million for your entire district. Westport only got about 126,000 of that. So this little tiny piece came back into your district for that investment. So another way of looking at it is your road spending per linear foot is about 65 cents versus District 2 that's getting more than double that investment. And again, these are data points that could help conversations going forward about fairness. So back to Old Westport, your sales tax contribution, you contribute about $7 million to the city, which gets put into the sales taxes for capital projects. All districts are getting 30, and you received about that little square of city funds to fund you all. That's 126,000. So you gave 7 million, you get back 126,000 when your actual need is closer to 1.3 million. So hopefully these graphics help. We would argue that you should be receiving, you're not going to get all your money back, but that 1.3 would go further in your community than 126,000, and you've given 7 million already. So you're still a net loser even with 1.3 million. So you've produced 2% of the sales tax to the city, and you receive 0.4% of capital project fundings. Or another way of putting it, you contribute 5 times more in sales tax funded maintenance for the city than citywide. So hopefully that data point helps. So if you're not measuring this stuff, you can't manage it. You should be able to have these conversations with your city about what you have to spend. The street preservation program that your city has, these are just numbers from 1990 to 2024. And this is their data, and this is how it gets spread across the city. They're repairing some districts faster than others or spending more time. They track all of this stuff, and you can see Westport is right about in here in the area. So citywide, for every mile of road rehab that's going on, they're doing about 70% of that in Westport. So you're not keeping up with citywide average investment of maintenance. That's from 2019 to 2024. If you open that window further to 2014, it gets worse. So it seems like the city is catching up, but you're still behind on your average maintenance. So they actually track all of the potholes, and we put them on a map. And the average potholes per mile citywide is about 8 potholes per mile. And you all in Westport are living with more than double that at 19 potholes per mile. And again, there's a question of fairness here, that you're a very productive area. It seems like that reinvestment should come faster to at least keep up with maintenance in your community, and shouldn't be foisted onto the back of the CID to carry that. When you look at your district overall, District 4, the average is 12 potholes per mile. So your district is doing worse than citywide. But even within the district, Westport is 19 potholes, not double average, but about 1.5 average in your potholes per mile. So here's how that stacks up. Your potholes per linear mile versus city average and where they're located. You're not the worst district. There are other districts that have a lot more issues than y'all, but you're not performing the best. Like the gray areas are doing all right. So this is kind of cutting away everybody so you can see Westport. And then this is the unresolved potholes per linear mile. We're nerds. We like to make models of all this stuff, but these will hopefully help you make continued conversations with your city so that you can see and get this investment fixed in your community. So to compare you with some neighborhoods, we just grabbed Roanoke, Old Westport, Country Club Plaza, Briarcliff West, Armour Hills, and Glen Lake, which is far east, Kansas City. Just so you can see how you stack up. This is the tax revenues as a percent of city total. You're not the best producer. Armour Hills is the best producer in this one, but you're doing all right. You're keeping up with Country Club Plaza as a percentage of earnings. When you look at the tax revenues as a percent of total for sales, so this is your earnings tax, this is your sales tax. Now you start to pick up steam, and you outperform Country Club Plaza as a percentage of city sales. And then this is the property tax. You're about neck and neck with Briarcliff West, and then stacking it all up, you're a little bit better than Country Club Plaza at 0.87% versus 0.8, and Glen Lake is performing the worst. Now add to that what the costs are of road maintenance. You can see Glen Lake has the least road maintenance, and you're probably middle of the pack. And stack your revenue on top of that to see if this is your money in the door and this is your cost of service what's your net position, subtracting your cost against your revenue, you're net positive, while Glen Lake and Roanoke are net negative, or being subsidized by other districts. So when you're not getting that money back in your neighborhood, it's not that you're not getting that money back, it's that other places are consuming that revenue across the city, and they may need the help. But it's just have the conversation with your community and realize that that money has to come from someplace and harvest that wealth. So here's your revenue percent of sales, or sorry, share of tax revenue per acre. Here it is as a bar chart. Here's the maintenance run across the city. Here it is as a bar chart. Here's the side view of the model, stacking the revenue. If we floated your whole city into a lake, the revenue, and then these are your Country Club Plaza, Westport, in downtown. So north is to the left over here. And then this is the net position of those. So both you all, downtown, and Country Club Plaza are net positive in your model. So here it is in 3D, and again, a bar chart. So what's kind of evident in the model is, no offense, but the city looks like it's got a big Gumby head up here, and it's got a little arm that sticks out and two legs down here. It just kind of spreads out. You have a pattern that you all know of how you grew, and there's a cost and consequences to that annexation history. So Westport predates the city. This is a map that was drawn in 1905, talking about in 1855, what are the roads that were there. But y'all were created in 1853, and there are other city pieces that were added. So just kind of showing you from a time standpoint, Westport was incorporated in 1853. Country Club Plaza shows up in 1922-ish area. In Kansas, the city of Kansas incorporated or annexed with Westport in 1897. Immediately after that, you had this huge growth spurt. So one of the lessons of Kansas City looking from Asheville is that as you grew, you added it and birthed another downtown. And when I say downtown, it's a mixed use environment that's connected to a walkable neighborhood. And that's this thing called Country Club Plaza. When you grew again from 1940 to 1970, why did you not do that again? Why didn't you learn from yourself and your pattern of growth? And there's consequence to that. You also lost population and you came back to 510. So you could split your population in half. The first 250,000 people happened there, and you took up this whole growth period to do your second 250. Looking at it on a map, Old Westport is in the dark green area there, or the mid green one. And you have that fine grained network of streets. Also to the north of you and the south of you, there's a pattern of how you grew your streets and infrastructure. And then here's the different annexation patterns that happened after that. And this window from 1951 to 1975 is a tremendous effect that you're dealing with right now, just so you know. So this is a conversation that you need to have citywide. So looking at your population density, this is your first, I guess this would be the city of Kansas area, and then you get incorporated in with it. So you add a tremendous amount of land area. You can see how your density drops because you added a large area, but this is your feet of road per person. So you're about the same places where you were in 1860. As you annexed, your feet of road per person drops because your population's going up. And then this is up and through World War II. And then this next wave is where things get crazy. Because you added so much land, you pulverized your density, you decreased your density, which is fine, but you're picking up a lot more infrastructure per person in that. So there's a trade-off. If you want to stretch out and consume more real estate, awesome, but you're also picking up more infrastructure. It becomes more costly to run your city, and you're still hovering out there trying to eat this diet of all of these roads that you've got. So just so you know, from a standpoint of where you peaked or where you're at, you're about 3 times the amount of infrastructure per person or road per person than you were in 1950 before you did all of that annexation. So one of the reasons why you have those potholes is the time at which these roads were put in. So to think of your roads, this is sort of looking at all the roads that came in those windows of annexation. So that period from 1950 to 1975, you got a lot of lane miles of roads in that bucket. And those roads, when they're built, come back to haunt you with the first rebuild in 2030. So you're starting to pay for those roads right now with some of the roads that were built in, let's say, 1955 or something like that. So this is your first rebuild cycle. Then you've got a second rebuild cycle because these roads last forever. And then this is the third rebuild cycle, and that will keep on going. So you're sitting out here right now, and your city is dealing with this sort of heart attack of decisions that were made 50 years ago. And there's a reason why they're sort of scrapping for money, is that the roads last forever, and there's a cost and consequence to that. So just so you know, there's a lesson of Westport, or a lesson from the citizens of your community and how they built the community. So this is looking previous to, this is your 1926 boundary. Not everything is net positive in this community, but as a ratio, it's a 1 to, let's call it 3 ratio of productivity. When you look at the outside area, outside of your 1926 boundary, you see how flat that is by comparison. The modern American suburban development pattern has this baked into it. But realize, if we look back at Country Club Plaza, that was a suburban development back in the day, but it had a different DNA. So if you did that, if you said, okay, well, what could you learn from Westport, downtown, and Country Club Plaza? What can we learn from Kansas City, and could we replicate it? Could we have it in different districts outside those areas, so you're not so dependent on that one spine floating everything? And this is just an overall question. How can you learn? Okay, so just to recap, you have these districts like Country Club Plaza, as well as Westport and downtown. They're all different scales of golden geese. Golden geese will produce golden eggs. They're awesome, but you've got to feed the goose. You've got to reinvest in those areas to keep them going, and they'll keep on contributing. That's the lesson of the forms that we see in Kansas City. So from here going forward, what are the takeaways? Well, realize that Old Westport is like, you could sell it and buy like 1.6 Patrick Mahomes. He's kind of expensive. He's a $45 million player, but that shows you the value of your community. So you're a leader in tax revenue production. When you look at it over time, the numbers show how you produce versus the city. Be proud of that, celebrate that, share this. This is information that shows how you succeed. And there are lessons here that should be applied citywide as well. You're growing faster than the city and your district. So again, the community needs to hear this. They need to see the data and learn from you all, and work with you on how to replicate some of this out in the community. You're behind on your infrastructure maintenance. This is something that needs to be turned around compared to other neighborhoods. There's an overall fairness question. Should you be at least average of the community? Yes, you're going to be more expensive because your roads are older and you have a higher density of roads, but on average, you should be at least what the city is from a maintenance standpoint, and you're definitely deserved a more pothole action. So this gets back to the feeding the goose standpoint. If you're going to be harvesting this revenue out of your community, keep it up to its maintenance level that it can handle. You're keeping up with other neighborhoods of similar typology. You're doing quite well in your neighborhoods, yet you receive less infrastructure investment, especially when compared to the city average. So that needs to be turned around. Hopefully this is enough data and enough evidence to help you make that case. And finally, learn from Westport. Your city and region should be learning from you all and taking these lessons and finding a way to harvest new growth opportunities in other areas. These won't be competitions, because they're going to be different neighborhood cores out in other areas, and it's going to be a surgery that they have to do. And finally, Westport's already productive on its own, but imagine how much more it could be with some reinvestment from the city. So your district as a whole is outperforming everything in the community. There should be some reinvestment back. You're very productive, and it shows in this model in the community. For those of you that are new to our work, I hope this wasn't too nerdy. We also have a lot of our work is covered on a blog called Strong Towns and in this book, if you want to share this with your friends. And thanks for letting us do some math.